Family wanted me to marry my rich cousin instead of my jobless fiancé. I refused and got kicked out. A year later, my cousin's in jail. I'm happily married and pregnant. 126F. Have been with my fiancé Lance to 7M for 5 years. For some context, I come from a very traditional and frankly money-obsessed family. My mom, 52F, has always been clear about her priorities. Wealth and status. My dad, 55 meters, is more laid back, but still leans heavily on my mom for decision-making. I have a younger sister, Rita, 24F, who is the golden child. She's never worked a day in her life and is more than happy to reap the benefits of our parents' money. Then there's Kyle, 27M, my cousin who's extremely wealthy and always the apple of my mom's eye. Kyle and I grew up together, and while I've never had feelings for him, my mom has been hinting at me marrying him since we were teenagers. He's successful, owns several properties, and has a business empire, according to my mom, making him the ideal husband. But I've always made it clear that I didn't want to marry for money. I love Lance with all my heart. Our wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. We had everything planned: the venue, the dress, and even the honeymoon. Lance and I worked hard to make it happen. Even with our limited budget compared to what my mom wanted, she insisted on adding extravagant elements, but I pushed back because I didn't want her money to overshadow Lance the love and I were putting into this day. The tension was already building. My mom had this idea that weddings should be opulent events, something to brag about to her friends. But I was more interested in celebrating our love with and close family. Then came Lance's job loss and everything changed. 1 week before the wedding, Lance came home looking exhausted. His company had gone through massive layoffs, and unfortunately Lance's department was one of the ones hit hard. I could see the guilt in his eyes as he told me the news. He kept apologizing, thinking he'd let me down right before our wedding. But honestly, I wasn't mad at him. I was scared, but not because of the wedding, because I knew how much this job meant to him. We decided to postpone the wedding. Lance wanted to find another job quickly, so we could still go through with it soon. But I didn't care how long it took. I love him, and I know that no matter what, we'll get through it together. My family's reaction was a different story. When I told my mom about the job situation and our decision to delay the wedding, she flipped out. She started talking about how it was a sign that Lance wasn't good enough for me. Then she said something that left me speechless. She suggested I marry Kyle instead. According to her, this was the perfect opportunity to secure my future. Marrying Kyle would solve all my problems: financial security, family pride, and she'd be thrilled to show off at a grand wedding. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I love Lance, and the thought of abandoning him because of a financial setback, so I refused. And marrying my cousin, that's just you. But my mom didn't stop there. She gave me an ultimatum. I had 1 month to rethink my decision, or I'd be out of the house. I couldn't believe it. The room I've called my own for 26 years was suddenly up for grabs. Rita would be moving because I wouldn't need so much space anymore. It felt like she was pushing me out, not just from the house, but from the family itself. All because I wouldn't marry Kyle. To add insult to injury, my sister Rita jumped at the chance to take over my room. She's always been spoiled and entitled, but this was a new low. She walked into my room the day after my mom started measuring it for her new furniture. She didn't even ask if I was leaving yet. She just assumed I'd give up my life with Lance to marry Kyle. I tried talking to my mom again, but she stood by her decision. According to her, I'd be throwing my life away if I didn't marry into wealth, and she wasn't going to support me if I didn't make the right choice. My dad didn't say much, just the usual passive agreement with my mom. I confronted Rita about taking over before I'd even made a decision, and she just shrugged. Well, you'll be gone soon anyway, so why does it matter, she said, with this smug look on her face. It hurt more than I'd like to admit. She's always been the favorite, but this was next-level betrayal. After the confrontation, I knew I couldn't stay in the house any longer, so I decided to move in with Lance. Despite the uncertainty of our financial future, we may not have much right now, but we have each other, and that's enough for me. I started packing my essentials, and when my mom saw what I was doing, she didn't try to stop me. She just watched. Rita, on the other hand, was practically giddy about getting my room. Moving out of my childhood home was hard. But what was harder was realizing how little my family valued my happiness. They were more concerned about appearances than the fact that I had found someone who truly loves me. Lance was supportive through all of this. He felt guilty thinking he'd caused this rift in my family, but I told him that none of this was his fault. This was my family's choice, not ours, Ida. For refusing to marry my cousin and choosing to move in with my fiancé. Despite his financial struggles, Update 1: moving in with Lance was the right choice for me, but it wasn't without its challenges. We were barely getting by with Lance's savings and my modest income. It was hard adjusting from planning a beautiful wedding to figuring out how to pay rent. Some days I wondered if we made the right decision, especially with the pressure from my family looming over us. Lance was applying for jobs left and right, but the market was tough. There were days he would come home dejected, and it broke my heart to see him feel feeling so defeated. We agreed to scale down our wedding plans and focus on until we could afford a small ceremony. Even though it wasn't the grand affair I once envisioned, I was content knowing that we'd be married, even if it was in a courthouse with just a few friends. Meanwhile, my mom and Rita were thriving. At least they thought they were. My mom made sure to remind me every chance she got that I was making a huge mistake. Whenever I would speak to her on the phone, which was getting rarer and rarer, she'd casually mention Kyle, how he had just bought another property or expanded his business. It was as if she was trying to convince me that I still had time to change my mind. Rita, on the other hand, made herself at home in my old room. She'd redecorated and even sent me pictures of her new space, clearly trying to rub salt in the wound. The worst part was the smug satisfaction in her voice. Whenever she'd talk about how comfortable and luxurious her life was, it was clear that she and my mom felt like they had won. Surprisingly, my dad reached out to me more than I expected. He never outright said it, but I think he felt guilty about the way my mom and Rita had treated me. A few times, he quietly slipped me some money to help with rent and groceries, saying it was a gift and not to tell my mom. While I appreciated his help, it was a stark reminder that he was unwilling to stand up to Rita. As for Kyle, he was furious that I had turned down the chance to marry him. I didn't hear this directly from him, but through my mom and other family members, it became clear that he took my refusal personally. He thought that marrying him was the best choice for both of us, and he felt insulted that I chose Lance, especially when Lance was now unemployed. It didn't help that my mom kept fanning the flames, constantly telling Kyle that I was making a huge mistake, and how disappointed the family was. Eventually, Kyle stopped hiding his feelings and even started making toward Lance and me. He warned me through our family that I would regret my decision, and he made it known that he wasn't going to be as forgiving as the weeks went by. I started hearing more disturbing rumors about Kyle. Turns out his successful business wasn't as he liked to make people believe. There were whispers within the family that Kyle had been involved in some fraudulent activities, manipulating contracts and forging documents to secure some of his wealth. The cousin that my mom had been pushing so hard for me was a con artist at first. I didn't believe it, but as the rumors grew louder and more consistent, I realized there was truth to it. It became public knowledge within our extended family that Kyle's business was under investigation, and he was being sued by several clients who had been scammed. My mom was in complete denial. She refused to believe that her perfect nephew could do something so wrong. When I confronted her about it, she brushed it off, saying that people were just jealous of Kyle's success and were trying to bring him down. But I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. The scandal hit my family hard. My mom, who had spent so much time praising Kyle and pushing me suddenly to marry him, went quiet. When the news broke that Kyle might face criminal charges, she panicked. She started calling me more often. But this time, the tone was different. She wasn't gloating about how much better my life would have been. She was practically begging me to stay connected to the family, as if she needed to hold on to some sense of control. My dad, on the other hand, remained distant but supportive. I think he always had doubts about Kyle's success, but he never voiced them. Now that Kyle was exposed, my dad quietly stood by me, offering more financial help when he could. But it was clear that he was torn between keeping peace with my mom. Rita, who had always idolized Kyle, had her world shattered. She had been so wrapped up in his wealth that she couldn't see the truth. She went into damage control mode, trying to protect her own reputation. But it was clear that her influencer dreams were slipping away. No one wanted to associate with someone connected to a scandal. The final nail in the coffin came when Kyle was officially arrested. On charges of fraud, the whole family was thrown into chaos. My mom was devastated. Everything she had built up in her mind about Kyle came crashing down, and she was left scrambling to figure out how to save face. She reached out to me, asking if I would reconsider reconnecting with the family and attend some family gatherings to smooth things over. I was shocked after everything that had happened. She still thought I'd come back into the fold like nothing had changed. I refused. Now I find myself in a strange position. My relationship with my family is fractured, but I feel Lance and I are struggling. But at least we're building something unlike real. The facade that my family clung to for so long. Despite everything, Lance and I decided to go ahead with our wedding. We had put it off long enough, and even though things weren't perfect, we didn't want to wait for the right moment anymore. We chose a small, intimate garden wedding. Nothing like the grand event we had initially planned, but it felt more personal and true to us. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. It was held in the backyard of Lance's parents' house, which they graciously offered for the occasion. The guest list was short, close friends, a few supportive family members from Lance's side, and my dad, my mom, and Rita were noticeably absent. I didn't expect them to come after everything that had happened. Honestly, I didn't want them there. Walking down the aisle, I didn't feel any of the regret or hesitation that my family had tried to instill in me, like I was the only person in the world. And at that moment, nothing else mattered. My dad walked me down the aisle, and while he wasn't very vocal about his feelings. I could tell that he was proud of me for what I wanted. He even gave a little speech during the reception, which, knowing my dad, was a huge deal. It was short and simple, but it brought tears to my eyes. He said, "I've always believed that love should guide us, not money or status. I'm proud of Lucy for choosing love." It was all I needed to hear. One surprise at the wedding came in the form of Kyle's parents. They had been pretty quiet during the whole fallout, but on the day of the wedding, they showed up unexpectedly. I wasn't sure how to feel when I saw them there, but they approached me with nothing but kindness. Kyle's parents had been embarrassed by their son's actions, and they wanted to apologize for the way everything had turned out. They explained that they had no idea about Kyle's fraudulent activities and were ashamed of how things had spiraled. They also made it clear that they had tried to stay out of the drama, but now they wanted to extend an olive branch. They even brought us a wedding gift, a very generous one. It was unexpected, to say the least. They gave us a check to help with our future. Something they said was a gesture to make up for all the chaos Kyle had caused. Lance and I were both shocked by their generosity, but we accepted it graciously. It was one of the few moments in this whole mess I felt like things were finally settling down. After the wedding, Lance and I moved into a modest apartment. It wasn't anything luxurious, but it was ours. We both agreed that we wanted to start fresh, away from the expectations of my family and the drama that had surrounded us. For months, our focus was on building a life together, one that wasn't defined by money or status. Lance finally landed a new job a few weeks after the wedding, and while it wasn't as high-paying as his previous one, it was a fresh start. He was happier, less stressed, and it felt like we were slowly getting back on our feet. We started saving for the future, talking about the things we wanted to achieve together. We've been focusing on our careers and our relationship, planning for the future. While it's been a struggle, I wouldn't change a thing. We may not have the wealth that my family always dreamed of, but we have something better. A relationship built on love, trust, and mutual respect that to me is priceless. Update 3. It's been 1 year since our wedding, and looking back it feels like a lifetime ago that we were dealing with the chaos caused by my family. Lance and I have been through so much, and despite all the challenges, we've come out stronger than ever. For our 1-year anniversary, Lance surprised me with a romantic dinner at a quiet little restaurant. It wasn't anything extravagant, but that's what I loved about it. Just the two of us reflecting on the past year and how far we've come. I remember sitting there holding his hand, feeling so grateful for everything we had overcome together. We toasted to love, resilience, and our future. The best part of the evening wasn't even the dinner. After we got home, Lance shared some incredible news. He had just been promoted at his job. It wasn't just a small promotion either. This one came with a substantial pay raise and more stability. He had worked so hard over the past year to rebuild his career, and I couldn't be prouder of him. This promotion felt like a symbol of everything we'd gone through, a sign that better days were finally here. I wish I could say that my family completely stayed out of our lives, but they hadn't over the past few months. My mom has been making more and more attempts to reach out. She's been calling and sending messages trying to make amends. She even went as far as sending a card on our congratulating us and saying she was ready to move forward. Rita, too, has been trying to get back in my good graces. She reached out a few times, mostly with half-hearted apologies about the way she acted during the whole Kyle situation. She admitted that she had been jealous of the attention from Lance, jealous of the independence I had, and even jealous that I had the strength to stand up to my family. While part of me wanted to believe that they were genuine, I wasn't so quick to forgive. After everything they put me through, it wasn't that simple. I didn't want to cut them out of my life completely, but I also didn't trust them the way I used to. So I decided on a cautious approach. I agreed to limited contact with both text messages and occasional phone calls, but nothing more. I needed time to heal from the damage they caused, and I wasn't going to let them waltz back like nothing had happened. Just when I thought life couldn't get any more surprising, I found out I was pregnant. Lance and I had talked about starting a family, but we weren't actively trying. So, when I took that pregnancy test and saw the positive result, I was in complete shock. The first person I told, of course, was Lance. I'll never forget the look on his face when I showed him the test. Pure joy and disbelief all at once. He hugged me so tightly that I could barely breathe. And for the first time in a long time, everything just felt perfect. We laughed, we cried. And then we started talking about our future as if things couldn't get any better. My dad came through with an unexpected support gesture, while my mom and Rita had been making their weak attempts at reconciliation. My dad had quietly been watching from the sidelines. He didn't say much during the family drama, but I think he understood more than I gave him credit for. One afternoon, he called me and asked if we could meet for lunch. I was hesitant at first, but I agreed. When we sat down, he didn't waste time with small talk. He got right to the point and told me that he wanted to help us with a down payment for a house. My dad wasn't usually one to make grand gestures, but this one meant the world to me. He told me that he had been saving up for a long time. And while my mom didn't know about it, he wanted to use the money to help Lance and me get our first home. He said it was his way of apologizing for not standing up to my mom. When I needed him most, I could see how hard this was for him, and it made me realize just how much he cared. My dad wasn't the kind of person to express his emotions easily, but this gesture spoke volumes. I accepted his offer with gratitude, knowing that this was his way of showing his love in the only way he knew how.